E. The moment the door closed behind my husband, I felt an unsettling mix of guilt and excitement. He was off on yet another business trip, leaving me alone in our large, empty house. This had become a routine, one I'd grown used to over the years. But this time, something felt different. Something I couldn't quite place. It started with a single message. A friend of my husband's, someone I barely knew, sent me a text. "Hey, just checking in to see how you're doing while Dan's away." It seemed innocent enough, but there was something about the timing, the casual familiarity. That made me pause. I replied politely, thanking him for his concern, but his response was immediate and loaded with undertones I couldn't ignore. "If you need anything at all, just let me know." By the time I put my phone down, I'd received 2 more messages from different men. Friends, colleagues of Dan's, men I'd met only briefly at parties or work events. Each message carried a similar vibe, friendly on the surface, but with a subtle edge that hinted at something more. It was as if they all knew Dan was gone and saw an opportunity. The first man to show up was Greg. He'd always been charming, the type who could light up a room with his smile. He claimed he was in the neighborhood and thought he'd stop by to check on me. I let him in, not wanting to appear rude, but the way he looked at me, it wasn't friendly. It was hungry. "You must be so lonely with Dan gone all the time," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I can't imagine how you do it." I laughed nervously, trying to brush off his comment, but he didn't stop there. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine as he reached for his drink. "You're a beautiful woman, you know that? Dan's a lucky man." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was Eric, another one of Dan's colleagues. He acted surprised to see Greg. But the tension in the room was palpable. They exchanged pleasantries, but their eyes kept drifting to me, their gazes lingering a little too long. As the evening went on, more men arrived. Each one brought a new layer of tension, a new set of challenges to navigate. There was Paul, the quiet and mysterious one. Jason, the smooth talker with a knack for making you feel like the only person in the room. Mark, whose intense stare sent shivers down my spine. And finally, Andrew, the joker who always knew how to make me laugh. They each had their own way of drawing me in, of making me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. The conversations were light at first, filled with laughter and harmless flirtation, but as the night wore on, the atmosphere grew heavier. They started to compete for my attention, their words becoming more suggestive, their touches more daring. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I knew I should have stopped it, should have sent them all away and locked the door behind them. But I didn't. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just a bit of fun to break the monotony of my lonely nights, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was playing with fire, and I couldn't bring myself to walk away. At one point, Greg pulled me aside into the kitchen. "You know we're all here for you, right?" he said, his voice low and serious. "But if any of us crosses a line, just say the word." His words were meant to reassure me, but they only added to the confusion swirling in my mind. I felt like I was on the edge of something I couldn't fully understand, something that both thrilled and terrified me. The night spiraled further when Jason suggested a game. "Let's make this interesting," he said with a grin, "a little truth or dare to keep things fun." I hesitated, but the others jumped at the idea, their excitement infectious. The dares started innocently enough, silly tasks meant to make us laugh, but it didn't take long for the tone to shift. The questions became more personal, the dares more daring. By the time it was my turn, all eyes were on me. "Truth or dare?" Andrew asked, his eyes gleaming with mischief. I knew I should choose truth, keep things safe, but something inside me, some reckless part of me, chose dare. The room erupted into cheers, and Andrew's grin widened. "I dare you to tell us your deepest, darkest secret," he said, his voice dripping with challenge. My heart pounded as I searched for an answer, something to satisfy them without revealing too much. But before I could speak, Greg stepped in. "That's not fair," he said, his tone protective. "A secret's too personal. Let's give her something else." The tension broke and the game continued, but the moment lingered in my mind. Greg's intervention felt like a lifeline, a reminder that not all of them were playing the same game. As the night wore on, the boundaries blurred further. Each man seemed to have his own agenda, his own way of trying to win me over. And as much as I tried to resist, I found myself drawn to each of them in different ways. It was a dangerous dance, one that left me feeling exhilarated and exhausted. When the last of them finally left, I was left alone with my thoughts. The house felt even emptier than before, the silence deafening. I knew I'd crossed a line, that I'd let things go too far. But I also knew I couldn't undo what had happened. The next morning, as I tried to piece together the events of the night, I received a message from Greg. "I hope you're okay," it read. Last night got a little intense. I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. I wanted to believe his concern was genuine, that he wasn't just another man trying to take advantage of the situation. But after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure who I could trust, including myself.